Hello and welcome to another CGC show. My name is Simon Powers and this show is put together by Classical Guitar Corner Academy, which is an online school for guitar. And many of the people you'll see popping their chats in the chat are members there from the Academy. That's why we all seem to know each other so very well. In today's show, we are going to have a look at one of our most beloved pieces of our repertoire, not necessarily the guitar repertoire, as in it wasn't written for the guitar. That is Asturias by Issac Albeniz. Well, that's how it's known to us. But in preparing just a little bit of a look into this piece, I discovered that there's more to that name than we might first think. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll just have some fun digging into arrangements and interpretations and what really, I'm talking about why this piece is so fantastic for the guitar, why it captures our imagination. But I like to see, I've got the chat today, which is fantastic. So hi, Steve. Linda, thank you for tuning in. I know it's getting a bit late over there in Germany. Matthew, I know it's probably early there in Australia. Ron, Kevin, welcome. Mr. Roger Ramirez, the Roger Ramirez is in the house. Podcasting star of CGC Academy. Eduardo, great to see you. And I even saw Chuck in earlier saying, be kind. We absolutely will. Erica, lovely to see you. John, I saw Les in there. It must be early for you, Les, out in Kangaroo Island. Some wonderful exam submissions have been coming in for September. This is our exam month, and just outstanding submissions. Les, I was just listening to yours this morning because we were chatting about your submission and commenting on the musicality of it and the great ideas that you had. So I was really enjoying listening to your interpretations there. I think that we've been placing bets on how many exam submissions we're going to get. And Dave and I think we're in the running at the moment, sort of in the mid 80s, as opposed to the more ambitious ideas of the mid hundreds, 120, 130 or so. But we'll see. There's always a big flood of submissions towards the end of the month. So we'll see. We'll see. But, and there's my mum. Hi, Mum. That's Judy Angus there saying hello. Good morning, Mum. She's in Australia too. So everyone can say hi to my mum. She's in the chat. So before we dive in to Asturias today, you know what I've never done before, but I was told by someone to do this because we're on YouTube. If you enjoy these episodes, please go ahead and hit the like button. It feels very cheesy saying that, but I think it's pretty standard for YouTube. So give us a like on the video, and that'll maybe help get CGC seen a bit more broadly around the traps. Let's have a listen and watch at another one of our CGC stories. Now, you may have seen this one before. We actually played it last season, but I've been playing one each Tuesday for these learning sessions, and I think we're going to enjoy another story here, and this one is featuring Mr. Robert Guerrero.
We first met Robert at the CGC Summer School in June of 2018. We learned that Robert was a busy professional who was also very involved with the classical guitar in 2 local classical guitar societies and had a big passion for the instrument. At the time, Robert wasn't yet a member at CGC Academy. He had already been studying with a great private teacher in Philadelphia for 3 years. But he had such a big passion for music, he wanted more. So Robert joined the Academy shortly after the summer school. While he was not an absolute beginner when starting out at CGC Academy, he decided nonetheless to start at the beginning. He focused especially on improving his tone production and rhythm, relieving physical tension, and developing musical expression. The structure of the CGC grades curriculum provided Robert with many of the tools he needed to address these focus areas, and he used the curriculum and materials from the Academy with his private teacher in Philly. Robert made vast amounts of improvement over the course of his first year at CGC Academy. He submitted 3 grade exams, passing them all with excellence, and became deeply involved with other aspects of the site as well. Robert began to use the coaching calls and had some real light bulb moments.
Wow. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah.
He began to participate in some of CGC's live events and eventually helped to organize a meetup in Wilmington, Delaware. He attended another meetup in Philadelphia. He performed in a masterclass with Simon at the Lancaster Classical Guitar Society.
Oh, I like that.
And he attended and performed at the 2019 CGC Summer School as well. During that time, Robert made many connections within the community at CGC Academy and developed a close friendship with Academy member Derek, who also lives in Philly and with whom Robert began to play duets together. Over the last year, Robert and Derek, Duodelphia as they're called, recorded 8 duets together. After a year and a half of membership at CGC Academy, Robert has successfully passed 3 grade exams, worked on and recorded duets with his new duo, and performed at 2 summer school open mics as well as a masterclass with Simon. Who's to tell what another year and a half holds in store?
It says, Dave said, who's to tell what another year and a half will bring? And I don't know how long it's been since we've made that video, but it's probably about 6 months. So we've got a year to go before we can actually answer that question after playing that video. So thank you, Dave, for putting that video together. These have been wonderful to showcase some stories of CGC members. And thank you also, Robert, for being you. And yes, so let's have a dive into this piece. So, of course, I think the vast majority of people watching would be familiar with this piece. But if you're not, oh, there's Robert. Great. If you're not, you may well have heard it over the years. It's this. Etc. I just noticed I might have to move backwards. You can't see my fingers right now. In any case, so that's the piece. It's a real staple of the repertoire, and it's very recognizable. I think it's one of those pieces that is very recognizable even to people who are not classical guitarists. There's only a few of those pieces out there. There's a romanza, there's the Aramwith second movement, there's what else? Maybe even then we're starting to get a bit out of the range. So that's how well known Asturias is. It's in this very select group of pieces that's just beloved by classical guitarists and non-classical guitarists alike. And I think learning a little bit more about the piece gives us some interesting insight. And I'm going to start with the name. So the name Asturias is a place. It's a place in Spain. And I'm just going to play a little video that is what I used to think for the longest time. Anyway, this is very coincidental. I had it on my phone, so here's a little video. Hi everyone, we're here celebrating our 1-year anniversary, and we're in the north of Spain. And can you read that sign? This is Asturias, and I always thought it was in south of Madrid somewhere, a bit more sort of flamenco-ish, but it's actually way up here in the north, and you can see it's a very rustic, rugged coastline. It's very beautiful actually, and then it goes off. There's mountains really close to the coastline. It's the Atlantic Ocean, Atlantic Sea, and this is Asturias. So maybe you can think about that, or I will be anyway, the next time I hear that piece. Anyway, I hope you're all well, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye. So that I actually take quite a number of videos on my phone that never make it to CGC, talking to people, and then I just never get around to publishing them somehow. And yes, Chuck said nice shades. Thank you, Chuck. I have a rule for sunglasses. I only ever buy sunglasses at gas stations, petrol stations for those in Australia, and it has to be under $10. So that's my rule, because I always end up sitting on them. Anyway, the point is, what I said in there is that, yes, that's Asturias. It's the north coastline, sort of facing towards France, near Bilbao. And as I said, I always thought this was kind of a more flamenco Andalusian piece. It's a very evocative of that area. And lo and behold, it still is. So what I found out was that in the original publication of this piece, it was released as a set of, I think, 3 pieces, opus 232, called The Songs of Spain, Chants de España. And this was back in a time when exoticism was really popular. We had the Paris Exposition towards the end of the 19th century, and that's when Claude Debussy was writing pieces in the style of with Spanish elements in them. Although he'd never really been to Spain, he apparently set his foot over the border to see a bullfight in Bilbao once, and that was about it. But influences from Southeast Asia with gamelan music, jazz from the United States, and flamenco from Spain. These were musical influences a lot of classical composers started to take an interest in and incorporate into their music. So it was a time in Western classical music history, that this style of music became quite popular. And Issac Albeniz who was from around the Girona area, which is just north of Barcelona, was working with Felipe Pedrell, who is one of his teachers, and he was encouraged to write in a Spanish style evocative of folk idioms. And so that was the original piece. It had this piece that we know as Asturias as a prelude of these 3 pieces. So it was actually, that was its first form. It was a prelude of this little set, and preludes, as many of you may know, have a certain way about them. They're often a little bit more free and improvisatory in nature, and so that gives us some guidance. Then later on, because it was popular, a publisher chose to bring that prelude into a larger set of pieces called Suite Española. I think, is that what it's called? Let me see, I don't want to. Yeah, Suite Español, which has a whole set of pieces, all based on locations, largely in Spain. And so it was kind of, if you like, almost kind of a marketing thing, just a way to, not marketing, but it's a nice collection with a nice strong identity, something that was popular around that time. So all of this is to say that it really isn't about that location you just saw in that video of Asturias. It really is still tying into the flamenco roots. The other title you often see around this is leyenda, is legend. And I think that also goes very much into the flamenco world of duende and spirit and legend. And you can start to see where the musical material for this piece came about. Now, I want to share with you some elements that start bringing us into this world. So first of all, we've got this very energetic canto y bien marcado. So the melody is very marked and decisive. But then it builds and builds. And then we get these really exciting, perhaps thunderous, perhaps aggressive, abrupt chords. And this, to me, really is very evocative. If you've ever seen a flamenco performance featuring a dancer, because flamenco really has 3 parts. We've got the dancer, we've got the singer or singers, and we've the guitar as well. Probably in that order of importance. And these dancers will often have amazing footwork, very rhythmic footwork that can have these big builds and crescendos, and they're very fast. So I just want to play you a little bit to maybe bring some ideas of this sound to our world. So let me just, yes, I think I can do it here. Yeah. Beautiful material there, beautiful dancing, wonderful. And I think you can start to see that maybe that wasn't the most perfectly aligned piece of footage that aligns with, but you get the idea of those accents, those big, they're not sharp and light, they're very solid accents, powerful accents that are done with the feet. And I think that really is what we start getting, you can really see how that translates to something, that image of the dancer with the accents in the feet and having that energy coursing all the way through. Now, another element I want to bring into this discussion is a certain style. We might even call it, I don't know if we call it pitch centricity, but a focus on a certain note that we often get in music from Spain. Let me play you an example of cante hondo music being sung here, and then we can talk a little bit more about that. Well, that was also beautiful. It was actually not the video I thought I was going to play, but still, I think it communicates the idea. So what can often happen in music, the flamenco music from Spain, melodically, is that we can often stay fixated around a single note, often the fifth of the scale, and it can be very melismatic. Now, a melisma is where we take one syllable of a word being sung and it can be very florid and ornamented. So a really good example of this, and they're very familiar, is right, and of course with melismas and florid flowing notes all around that. Right, and that is in the key of B minor, and the F sharp is the fifth. In the key of that we play, Asturias, in E minor, the fifth is the B. And if you listen to the melodic material, it's really centered around. So we get that same focus, incessant focus on that B that becomes so powerful and driving. Along with that rhythm, it becomes very, very driving. And it almost like we find in some of the music of Bach, where he makes us wait for a resolution. That having it on the dominant all the time has this kind of suspenseful energy. Even towards the end of this whole passage, we don't get that, right? We don't get, oh, there's the finality of an E. But no, it sort of sits on this suspended dominant harmony. So those are some flamenco elements that come into play here. Now, something else I'd like to talk about in the context of this piece, and all of this, I think, is interesting, but it also informs how we will play. What I also want to do is I want to look at how it sounds on the piano, because many of you may know, but maybe you don't, that this is not written for guitar. This piece is one of the quintessential classical guitar pieces that was arranged from piano music. And this happens quite regularly with music from Granados and Albeniz. And some of these pieces that are already imitative of flamenco sort of come full circle and then work very well on the guitar. So they're piano pieces. But of course, there's certain elements that have to change because of practicalities of playing it, but then certain elements that have been added that we'll have a look at. So let's have a little listen to this wonderful, I'm just playing little excerpts. Hopefully YouTube won't ping me with copyright things. We're going to have a little listen to Luis Fernando Perez playing this Asturias on the piano. Let's have a listen. So, that's Asturias on the piano. Many of you, maybe that was the first time you've heard it. And of course, please go to YouTube and have a listen in your own time to some different interpretations. And that was a relatively fast one. So the key in the piano version is in G minor. It's different key center. And you may notice that there's a couple of really distinct guitar things that we do that the piano doesn't do. That in some ways sounds more challenging, which I think is very interesting, because normally we have to make concessions to get this kind of music, to either get violin music or cello music or piano music onto the guitar. We have to start removing things or play it slower. But this is one of those rare pieces that arguably, but supported by many, many people, actually works better on the guitar. And I did see a couple of people saying, yeah, well, Steve said it sounds warmer on the guitar, and Matthew said it sounds better on the Geet. And so, it's a rare instance of that. And sometimes it does happen. Sometimes things just suit the guitar. Like, for instance, basically everything by Issac Albeniz is written for piano, not guitar, that we play. Granada, Sevilla, all of this suite Espanol is all written for piano. Now, Philippe Pedrell, who was the teacher of Albeniz, was a guitarist himself. Albeniz was from the Barcelona region, and Miguel Llobet and Francisco Targa were in that region as well around the same time. And I can't tell you for certain, but I'd be quite sure that there would be arrangements being played on the guitar while that Albeniz would have heard. Now, I can't tell you who the first arranger may have been, but I can definitely tell you who was the most impactful arranger, and that was Andres Segovia. I will say as well, when I was reading up about some of these things, I came across an excellent article by Stanley Yates, and I highly recommend you, if you just Google Stanley Yates and Asturias, you will come up with his article blog online. Really well researched, really informative, and I have taken some information from that, so I just wanted to give credit where credit is due there. So let's have a listen to the Segovia version. So that is the legendary Andres Segovia playing an arrangement of Asturias there on the guitar. And you may have noticed already a couple of differences. One of the most noticeable is the triplets that come into play, which are very guitaristic and I think further enhance that build and crescendo on the instrument, but they're very difficult to play at speed. You may have noticed also that, these interpretations are very different, and we'll have a look in at the piano score momentarily, but the very first edition of this was actually, the tempo marking was allegro ma non troppo. I know Nikki's watching, so I'm trying my best, which is, fast or energetic, happy. Well, not happy, but that's sort of where it comes from, allegro. But fast, but not too much. That's what it means. So it may not need to be bullet speed, which we heard sort of in the piano rendition there, and sometimes with guitarists, it can, be a piece that we can showcase speed and dexterity. So I want to look in now at some of the scores and dive into some of those differences, because in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges to playing this piece on the guitar is to maintain the tempo while playing those triplets. But those triplets aren't in the original version, so I think there's some room there to come up with our own interpretation, our own ideas, and maybe we can get around that. I think that's absolutely feasible. So let's dive in. Let's have a look at the piano version. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask, and I'm really not the best multitasker. Let's have a look at the piano version. Okay. So you can see that once we've come to Suite Espanol, actually I wonder if, oh, never mind. That actually this is now number 5 in the set, so it's no longer put as a prelude, but it retains the name Asturias and Leyenda as a sort of secondary name, legend. Just prelude, Asturias, Leyenda, they all kind of work. I think Leyenda was included in the original Opus 232 along with the term prelude. So what can we see here? Well, maybe I can do a little bit of arts and crafts time. Is this going to work? Yeah. Okay. So first off, there is an allegro ma non troppo. So it's fast, but not too much. Secondly, we see marcato il canto. So decisive and marked in the song, in the melody. And here is bum ba beep ba ba bum. We also see staccato markings. All right. So on the piano, that might look like not using the expression pedal, the pedal that you push down. Sorry, I'm gonna do. Give me 2 seconds. I would like. Is this gonna work? I wanted. Here we go. Maybe this works. No, I want to share my screen, and I would like. Oh well, never mind. Let's go back. I was trying to get it so we could all see each other while I was chatting away here, but never mind. All right. So the staccato markings on the guitar, if we were to follow those, we've got these accents. You can see these marks here, and with a dancer, that might be the feet. Boom, boom. Having that pulse. And if we hear it in the larger context, we've got accent, bar along each, and then 2 bars. So it has a nice rhythm. So we get this kind of larger rhythm of those accents, which I really, really enjoy. We've also got staccato markings here on the top. So that would, on the guitar, you actually might replace let's say you're playing with the I finger. We put the finger back on the string to make those notes short. It's kind of hard to do, actually. But it's not this. I'm not saying you don't have to play it like that, but I'm just saying in this piano score, it's quite different to start off with. We also have crescendo markings marked in here, which I think lend themselves very nicely to that phrase. Then a crescendo, decrescendo. Finally, you might notice that we have a pianissimo. Apparently in the very first publication it was triple P, pianissimo, and triple F in some places. And I think that's really nice to describe. It gives us a better sense of just how dramatic the effect was intended. Here we have forte and then pianissimo, so I wonder if that's really indicating about this. We've got this crescendo leading up there. This very dramatic da 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 bump, and then straight back down to pianissimo. Very dramatic effect there. Still pianissimo all that way. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting, if it hasn't been interesting already. Here we have, this is what we have when we have on the guitar these triplets. On the piano version, we have essentially just notes played together. Now, I ask you, what do you prefer? Do you prefer, or do you prefer? I think I prefer the latter. I think it really is very guitaristic, but what's interesting is when we get here, right? This is where those chords start happening. We've got the, like the, couple of things are to note. First of all, obviously the accent, I think that goes without saying, but this is interesting here, this pedal. So we get the pedal on the chord, and then the staccato comes back. So that for us on the guitar, that can tell us a couple of things. One, that we cut the sound, as opposed to this. It's a subtle difference, but letting those notes ring on have a different effect, especially when we get up to here, as opposed to, like, it has much more of a percussive attack there. But what I was talking about before about it being very difficult to maintain the tempo, here in this section with the chords, you see again, we don't have triplets, right? We don't have these, but on the guitar, this is what we often are asked to do. Let me see if I can now show you. Hey, there it is. It's back to guitar. This is. It's almost like a little tremolo effect, but at speed, it's really quite challenging. I sometimes, if I've played this in the past, I actually use I and A. But honestly, I find it quite difficult. I mean, I think people that are good at tremolo would find this passage a bit more manageable. This, however, is much more guitaristic. It'll be very fast, but to keep the same tempo, to here, is really quite hard. And if you may have noticed in the Segovia recording, he actually slowed down when he got here because it's very hard to keep that at speed. So my point here is to say that I think it's an interesting idea to visit this piece with an idea that you might want to rearrange it to make it a little easier. And it's not by any means deviating away from the original music. So instead of having to do this, right, you might just do this. I mean, I think with the strumming and with the right musical shaping, it could be just as effective and dramatic and have that same build. And yet, just removing those triplets actually opens up this piece to a much wider range of players. Because, of course, it's a difficult piece, but that triplet there is pretty diabolical, you know, in terms of speed and control. One little caveat with that is, I think it goes a little backwards in terms of textural buildup if we go from the triplets. Or maybe not. To back to just the alternating strings. Maybe that does work. And then when we get to here, so, you know, you could incorporate those back, but the switching between them might not be to your taste. These are the kind of challenges that do come in when we arrange music, right? So we have to make choices, adaptations, but just make sure that you know that we're not having to base our decisions off of the guitar edition. It's just such a well-known edition, but we have a little bit more flexibility. And if you do want to see a version that does take this into account, again, Stanley Yates has a version in his arrangements of Albeniz music, and he does that. He actually doesn't use the triplets. So I think it's a really nice way to go about it. Brent saying, maybe you could begin it a bit more ma non troppo, so you wouldn't have to slow down with the triplets. That's a great point. If you start a little, maybe you could do a bit more of even more theatrical build-up by starting slower, and then just not having to be at, you know, breakneck speed by the time you get to the triplets on the same string. Other things that do happen as well is that we're going to have to make some chord substitutions, well, not chord substitutions, voicing substitutions here as well. As we get to these chords, you can't see my hand. Actually, it actually is more like something like, there's an A sharp in the bass. But a lot of guitar editions will play something like that, or even. So these things happen with arrangements as well. So I think there's some room here to be a little more flexible in terms of adapting the piece to our own level of playing, should we wish to. Another interesting thing that does come up when we listen to the piano, I think a lot of guitarists, when they play this piece, they're really seeking to be kind of with incredible rhythmic persistence, not even dropping a beat ever. But if we look at and listen at some of the piano versions, we see that there's quite a reach with both hands to go chunk, chunk. There's time that's taken there, and I think we can give ourselves the same kind of time. To give ourselves a bit of a break there. I think a lot of guitarists do this, but there's some room there. And sometimes I like to talk about the physics of music, making either, let's say, a scale going up gets harder and harder to get up, and then you go easily on the way down. And it's sort of, you have this sense of physical movement. And here, that example might feel like it's hard. Just like stomping your foot as a flamenco dancer takes force and energy. It's more theatrical, it's more engaging, it's more powerful. One thing I've noticed in recording sessions is that the rasgueado like this doesn't peak the meter of the sound meter as much as something with a thumb stroke. That has a lot more volume to it, but I think that sound has so much extra noise in there, the scraping noise, that it sounds louder and sounds more aggressive and sounds more powerful. So all of those aspects, I think, can be part of this whole build-up effect. I want to play through a couple of little ideas now of just how to interpret these sections and what different ideas might sound like. But I also want to then, before I do that, I want to show you the right hand, that rasgueado idea. There it is. So I'm talking the difference between something like this. Here I'm putting my thumb against my index finger, and another one might be using the thumb. But this is the rasgueado. So I think it has just a certain type of energy there, difference. Okay, so going back to the beginning, Brent recommended maybe we don't have to start so fast. I've seen a very compelling edition of this, a version of this played by Agnello Desiderio, starting like this. I think it's very exciting. And I think the effect there is you start very slow, and so you're like at a train, a locomotive, right? And so by the time you get to that full speed, it's got even more energy. I don't think that's represented in the original score. It's sort of immediately marked in time. There's no sort of idea, but I think it's very convincing. And I was struck by the interpretation because it was so different. It was very captivating when he did that. I think other aspects, however, and I think you can achieve that as well without going so fast. You can get the relative effect. But I think another one to do is really to pay attention to dynamics in the piece. So I think honing in on those, let's say the pianissimos is pianissimo, triple P, right? So let's say I'm going to go back to my right hand because this front camera is not really catching the left hand too well. But so let's start building up that tension and movement there, not so much with the tempo this time, but with the dynamic, right? So. So I think that's an example of mostly using dynamics, right? I think obviously another mix would be doing both as much as you can. However, there is quite a different feel of starting soft and going in time and building up just with dynamics. It's really a great effect if you can pull it off. You have to have a lot of control of dynamic touch. Many of us doing the exams right now, working on our dynamic control with scales. This is what it builds into, that beautiful gradation of dynamic. Look, I can see it's running towards the end of the hour now. Just before we wrap up, I want to just have a quick look at a guitar score. Find it. I think many of us may have seen this guitar score, but just to point out, this is a really nice one, actually. So this is a Creative Commons license that allows people to share it freely. It's by Stefan Apke. And he has done a great job here of actually, I have to zoom in maybe, including all of the information. So we talked about here's the prelude of the Cantos de España, but it would be in French, right? So Songs of Spain, Opus 232, the prelude, right? And then, of course, number 5 from the Suite Española, Opus 47. So he's acknowledged both there. Got all the titles all there. Here is the Allegro ma non troppo marking and the Marcato il canto. He's got the accents here as well, which is great. So you can see there's that texture, and here's where we get into the triplets here. That's this section. And the section I was talking about, which gets really quite challenging to play, is here, where we have these triplets, but now on one string. What's really technically quite challenging actually is getting the last couple of notes of the triplet before you go back to the chord. What I mean is those last two, because it can often get chopped off like this, like that, and then the last two B's are lost a little bit. So it's a really nice thing to focus in on getting them. It adds an extra bit of rhythmic nature, I think. Etc. And then we continue on with the triplets all the way through. And then we have, here we have, this is completely different. This little arpeggio at the end, it's quite different than it is on the piano, but still works. Or you can imitate the piano by sort of repeating those. Or there are other ways about going on that too. So it's coming towards the end of the hour. I wanted to give, some ideas, some insights on this piece that I think often aren't oh dear, we've got some comments coming in from people who are not really interested in guitar. That's all right. But I think our community manager, Dave Belcher, might help out there. So I think it's really interesting, the world that this came from and the influences. I think also how it sits within the guitar world as an arrangement. So all of these things I think might be interesting, and I think, hopefully it was interesting, a bit of an insight into the background of this piece. Because we hear it so much, sometimes it's quite nice to know a bit more about the background, to understand where it came from, and maybe even inform us in ways to play it as well. So we have a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions, I'll do my best to field some answers, and then we can wrap things up. This has been a really lovely opportunity to touch on some of these great pieces. We talked about the Chaconne a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about Asturias here. And it's a little bit different from full in-depth lessons, but I think it's nice to just touch on these pieces. Can also maybe enhance our listening experiences. So Gianluca asked, what about arranging this piece for guitar in G minor? Absolutely. There's a good example there, or a parallel with the fugue in G minor from Bach's Violin Sonata 1001. That's also in G minor. It suits string instruments. And on the guitar, we play it in an A minor. The reason the guitar, we often are, when we take arrangements and put them into different keys, is largely because of the fact that we can use open strings, and it helps us with certain things. So the key of E will benefit from the open string E, and the other E, the first string as well, the B. So we've covered the tonic and the dominant. Very good so far. We've got the subdominant, the A. The G, if it's in G minor, absolutely. Then we can help with those E minor triplets. And the D, maybe if we modulate to G major, that can be useful. So it's actually a really versatile key. A minor as well. We have the tonic and the dominant, the A and the E. What else do we have in A minor? Well, we've got all the natural notes there lying on the open strings, the G and the B, but maybe not as conducive there. But you can absolutely play it in G minor. It's just going to probably ask for some different challenges, and it will sound different. Flat keys on the guitar tend to sound, well, just different. I was just playing through some saw studies the other night because, we're guitarists. That's what we do in our free time. And I was playing a piece in B flat major. Maybe it was E flat. But I just noticed the guitar has certain sounds in different keys, and it's different. So it's not better or worse, it's just different. Let me see if there's any other questions that came through. So Brent said it was so unusual to see an upward arrow for a chord when you perform a downward motion on the guitar. Does this make sense? Absolutely, Brent. One of the things that I say in the very, very early videos at CGC, the fundamentals course, is that whenever we talk about up and down on the guitar, we're talking about pitch. So it's very logical, I think, for a lot of people to come to the guitar as beginners to say, go up a string, right? And then we go up as in towards the sky. And so we're taking kind of a directional idea there. But if you think up in terms of pitch, well, the third string's higher than the fourth and the second string's up from the third and so on. And so when you have an arrow that's going up on the page, it's simply saying we're going from the lower notes to the high. So that it makes sense when you think of it in terms of pitch. We're starting on the lower notes. Yes, the thumb goes down, but those indications are always about pitch. Yeah, hyperboreal. Maybe saying that correctly, I'm not sure. Yes, there is the chord that I noticed in Stanley Yates' version has an A sharp. I think it's G, C, G, C, E, C. I think that's the one you're talking about. And that has a lovely voice leading in the bass. Maybe you have to give up that high E, but you could argue that the bass leading, the voice leading there is worth it. I think it's really interesting when pieces take on their own life. You know, the version with the triplets and the version with a high chord has become the definitive version, but it's not what was written. Another example of this is the music Lagrima by Francisco Tárrega. Lagrima has a third section. I was blown away when I found this. There's a couple of books out there that have original manuscripts from Tárrega, and it has a whole third section in Lagrima. And it's not as, so that piece became famous because it is those two sections, but there is actually a third one. So, yeah. Anyway, let's see if there's any other comments. Chad, this is one of the pieces that tipped me away from a Telecaster to a Cordoba. Well, Chad, thank you for the comment. You're always so positive on here. I really appreciate that. And there's nothing wrong with having a Telecaster and a Cordoba at the same time. Mr. James Erickson is a perfect example of that. All right. Sounds like people are saying goodbye already. Yes, people are surprised at this third section of Lagrima. Yes, I never have had it. I don't have the score, but I've read the book. There's a really good book. It's original manuscripts. And yeah, there's a third section. It's really interesting. So I think Matthew made a couple of comments about the difficulty of this piece. Maybe we'll wrap it up there. The piece is quite... the speed makes it challenging, and obviously those triplets can be challenging, and the middle section has a whole different set of challenges. But this whole first section is quite guitaristic in this key. Sort of, you can go P, I, P, I, P, I on different strings relatively fast on the guitar. So I think, and this is why you've maybe heard a lot of renditions that are sort of half there with this piece, because you can play the beginning quite easily. If you want to grab your guitar, we can just very briefly walk through the first few notes. It's the 7th fret, 5th string, and then third with the first finger, and then the third finger on the 9th fret of the 4th string, and then just play 4, 1, 3, and then, is that it? Yeah. And then play the 4th finger on this is the G on the 10th fret. So that's all in 7th position. It's all played with the thumb, and then in between all of those notes, 2nd string. So and then you extend it out for that first section, just extends that idea with some different bass notes. That's pretty doable. And so it could be fun to just dive in and just play some melodic material here and get the feeling of it. It's just those triplets and the chords that start to add a real level of difficulty. So I would put this above grade 8. We probably will add it in the curriculum at some point. We've been talking about adding an advanced diploma, so that's where it would be. All right, it's 5 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. This was really enjoyable. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back on Thursday with a guest on the CGC show. And I hope you're well. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.